Welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where we talk about World of... just got a big dragon ass in the face. Welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where we talk about World of Warcraft. My name is Tom, and today we are going to be talking about the Vault of Incarnates. Doing a little verbal review about what's been happening down there. And to do that, I am joined by my co-host, Marty. Hey, Marty.
Hello there. Ready, check, and let's go.
Oh, I love that. Really on brand for this episode. And I think actually we couldn't have picked a better person to talk about raiding, because I feel like you're always raiding. I'm like, hey, Marty, want to hang out and play something or do something? You're like, no, I'm raiding.
I mean, that's when you're in a really bad guild and you have to raid every day. Then, that's... that's a lie. We only raid twice a week. So
it's not quite like the old days. I feel like you were raiding a lot more back in previous expansions when you were even more hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can definitely remember that at some point we did at least 3 days a week in raiding Mythic. So yeah, definitely been there as well, but not so much these days.
We just had to get that stamp of approval that you did do Mythic raiding. But we're actually talking about a raid difficulty mainly today that's even harder than Mythic difficulty, right, Marty? We're going to be talking a bit about looking for raid in general, I think, because that is how we raided together through this first part of Dragonflight. And as somebody that raids more difficult content and dropping down to looking for raid, how does that compare?
I mean, it's definitely more difficult going from heroic raiding to looking for
Oh, I thought you were going to say looking for raid is definitely more difficult.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
It is what I'm saying. It's more difficult.
Oh no, we're agreeing.
Because I actually don't think it's on paper more difficult. It's just when you have a bunch of people who needs to coordinate who don't coordinate because it's looking for raid, and people don't necessarily have the same learning curve. I think there's a lot people's understanding of the fights and stuff vary very much when you're looking for raid. So I think that's what makes it difficult. And then you have a lot of leavers as well who just wants to go in and one shot everything, and you have all sorts of people, whereas, when you're in a fixed raid group with guildies and stuff like that, you're probably a little bit more on the same level, and you're in the same headspace. We're doing this because we want to have fun, and we can only do that if we actually, learn the fight and are a little bit more coordinated.
And as somebody that doesn't raid above looking for raid currently, the first time I step into anywhere really, I take a look at that raid guide that's in game, which tells you about the bosses and their abilities. But honestly, I still don't think that's very coherent about like what the fights actually do, because they display a lot of information, a lot of abilities there, and I think they do try to highlight like what is a key ability. But I don't know if it's just me or if that is a common problem with people who do looking for raid. But I find myself reading that and just it doesn't give me a great understanding of the fight. And I think that's why a lot of people go for that visual aspect of, checking out a YouTube guide or something like that where they can actually see what's happening. I mean, that's always going to be better. But when it comes to raiding, you will probably have your own way in your guild to learn the fights, or like how are you preparing for that?
I mean, me personally, I don't read anything, I don't watch anything, I just go in and then we'll see what happens. And it's not because to be fair, normally, especially in the beginning of a raid tier, it's like, oh, we are aiming, this first raid week, we're aiming to down 3 or 4 bosses, and then I can go, and read up on tactics or stuff like that for the first 4 bosses, and then, by the time we at boss number 4, I would have forgotten everything anyway, because there's so many impressions going on. I'm definitely more like a learning by doing, getting to see how it works, because the level that we raid on, we'll never one-shot a boss anyway, even though everybody knew the tactics and stuff like that. So what is the point? Obviously, if we're like progressing on a specific boss week after week, then I might go in and just double check what the videos say, if there's anything we missed and stuff like that. But but just at the end of the day, learning by doing, learning by seeing what happens. I rarely make the same mistakes twice. So if I do something wrong and I die from it, or I raid wipe, or something like that, I'm like, all right, now I know that. Now I don't need to do that again.
And that's interesting because playing looking for raid is something that I haven't really ever done that much. I've dabbled it in the past, but generally I found it not to be a great experience, so I've avoided it. However, with Dragonflight, giving everything a chance again and going into Vault of Incarnate, interestingly, it has been somewhat of a positive experience in the looking for raid scene, and that shocks me. It does. And I don't know if it's because I move server and where it's pulling players from. I don't think it's anything to do with that.
No.
But I have found that, like you say, it has almost been that you're going in and you're one-shotting a few of the bosses because people know how to do them. You're not reliant on everyone really to pull their weight. So if you do lose a few players, it's not as costly. But
I do feel like, sorry to quickly interrupt, I do feel like the difficulty in the looking for raid is also from some of the bosses, especially the earlier bosses, sort of like back in vanilla, where you could raid Molten Core if you had like 15 capable people, and then just fill up the raid with just people who are there.
Yeah, we had one encounter, I think it was the council, where one of the tanks just left like partway through it, just couldn't be arsed, and we couldn't get another tank, so we just did it with one tank.
Yeah.
And you can still get away with things like that. So overall, I feel like I've had quite a positive experience of Vault of Incarnates in the looking for raid. And again, it was that matter of failing quite hard on certain bosses, looking at you, Raz, at the end there, but people explaining the simplicities of the fight, the things that were going to be costly, the things that were going to wipe the raid. I did notice there was just people just saying like, look, this is A, B, and C. Like, focus on that. And you maybe failed, and then you get that determination buff when you fail. So you're just like, oh well, we're getting stronger for sucking. So in that way, it does balance out. But yeah, I think it's been strange because I've actually really enjoyed doing this raid, and I wouldn't call myself much of a raider anymore, but I wanted to get in here. I wanted to follow the story on into Vault of Incarnates because it feels like with this raid specifically, like the story has gone there, and it's a massive part of what's happening next. Like if you don't go there, I think you're going to be like, well, hang on, who the heck are these other proto-drakes that turn into very, very badass human forms? And it is important from a story perspective to get that if you are interested in the story, and I feel like most players are. So yeah, giving it a chance, and actually, I can't believe I'm saying it, but it has been a really positive looking for raid this time out. And I don't know if that's because I was with you for most of that, Marty. I don't know if you want to take credit for that.
Sure, why not? No, I mean, if you're going into looking for raid, just go in and be chill, be relaxed. Just don't go into the mindset that you are the best raider in the world and you're going to one-shot everything. Because, as I said in the beginning, the range of people who are in there, it's so varied. So if you really want to have a good experience and you also know some of the stuff, give tips. And don't give tips and like, oh my god, why are you not doing this? Give tips like, hey, you guys who are messing up, if you do this instead, then it will be much easier for everyone. Or maybe, one of the things that I see often is people don't know what mechanics, are supposed to be soaked. So people are like, oh my god, I see a circle, I run away from everyone. And then you have like a train of people, following them. And then, and that's how mistakes happen. And 3 people dies because not enough people were soaking them. So...
Yeah, I definitely found that in the... I think is that the council fight where the elements are working with each other and against each other? I really like that fight, actually, that like use the fire to stop getting frozen. When you say it out loud like that, it sounds really simple and makes sense. But when you're in a raid encounter, like you say, people are generally used to being trained now that if there's something on the floor, do not stand in it. Like, absolutely not. And then it's like, oh, but actually you do have to stand in this one this time, and it's actually really important.
And I feel like, but again, if you're not used to it and if you don't raid that much, the different circles, they have like different animations. You can always see, is this one that needs to be soaked? Is this one that needs to be group soaked? Is this one that you need to get away with? So next time you're in there, try and pay attention to how the circle looks like, because the animations are actually different. So that's just a small tip.
My thoughts as well that we have evolved in how endgame works with World of Warcraft, because I remember back in my day in Classic or Vanilla, whatever we call it these days, is that the natural progression was you'd hit level cap, level 60, then you'd go into like a normal dungeon, and there was not really many mechanics in there. It was more just damage mitigation and things like that, and how well your healers could cope and your tanks were geared. So there wasn't really much to learn, but there was probably that aspect of like, well, you get some practice on pulling a mob, pulling packs of mobs, and crowd controlling, because that was a thing. And these days we've gone away from that, but I do feel with like mythic dungeons, etc., they are introducing mechanics in there, and I feel like mythic dungeons can be more punishing if you don't get those right, because you have a limited time and smaller group. Whereas I'm feeling now that looking for raid is almost that place where you do go when you hit max level now. It's like more of a low pressure stakes where, like we're saying, there's a lot of wiggle room of what can go right and wrong, and you can still be successful. And I think that is a great place to learn mechanics that are taking place in not just the raid, but also we do normally see that certain mechanics do get shared across the expansion with dungeons, etc. as well. And I think especially the Raszageth fight, and I'm sorry I'm jumping right to the end.
Let's go to the end, boss.
But that fight has quite a lot going on for it, just for looking for raid, and I don't think it's too much. It's a lot to take in when you first do it, but I actually think it's a great training fight for just somebody to start getting back into the game again. There's some important mechanics there that you need to get right. It's a really fun fight, and I don't know how it was on higher difficulties for you, but on looking for raid, I really enjoyed it, even though it was tough at times, and being the end one, you do want that one to feel a bit more significant, and I think it did feel like that. But how was it like on higher difficulties?
I think like I have it's both a love-hate relationship with fights like Raszageth, because the main issue is just it's a freaking long fight. So when you are not a high-end raider, even the high-end raiders probably have this issue, but when you're not like a high-end raider like we are only doing, we're still doing heroics, but still it's a long fight to progress through, because 15-minute fight to kill it. Imagine how the progression is that first you get 5 minutes in and you're wiping over and over, then you get that phase right, then you get into the next phase, then you get 12 minutes in, and 12 minutes is a long time to do something only to wipe and then have to do 12 minutes again, so that's probably the downsides with these long ass fights. We had it with Sylvanas as well, a freaking long fight. It's so annoying to have to go through the first two phases and then only to wipe in the beginning of the third phase, so that's like the downside to it. But upside, it's a fantastic fight. Absolutely love it. Once you get the hang of it, it's fun. It does so many moving parts. I really, really also, when you get the hang of it, I love those fights. When you're learning them, I'm hating those fights, But yeah. I guess the same can probably be said for all the raid bosses to a certain extent.
I think visually the Raszageth fight as well, because it's spread out in quite a large area, I suppose, because you've got various platforms, that you do see that just when you, like you say, are getting it right, just how that flows, and because people have to spread out to different platforms, and when you just see that all come together, even in looking for raid, like it is so satisfying, because you're teaching this mechanic, and I went into the Raszageth fight for the first time as well, being like, whoa, like what is going on here? What's all these platforms, and which side do I have to go to? And the thing with that fight I found as well, it was very disorientating on your mind because of the platforms, and you could, in looking for it, especially where you're perhaps not as rigid and structured in where your positioning is, and people are sort of suddenly roaming round Raszageth, and you just lose your orientation of actually where you're supposed to go. And there's definitely been times where I've seen somebody position themselves at the wrong point for the knockback onto the other platform. Wasn't me. No. Wasn't me that did that. And
not all the time, at least.
And I didn't have loads of people following me to the wrong spot to get knocked off and die. Must have been somebody else.
Must have been. I mean, to be fair, it's stuff like that can totally happen. I don't think I've been knocked off that many times, maybe the first few tries, something like that. But one thing that I kept being like killed to randomly, and that could even be like 50 tries in randomly, I didn't see the dragon move and do his breath. And it's one of those things, when it happens 50 tries in, for me at least, I'm like, oh my god, I'm such a freaking idiot, I'm so hard on myself and stuff, because it's such a simple thing, but sometimes, because I'm a healer, so I'm focused on bars, I'm focusing on keeping everyone up instead, and all of a sudden the dragon turns and I didn't see. I feel so stupid.
It's just that concentration, though, and like you say, on a long fight, like, you have to keep your concentration for a large amount of time. And when your brain is saying, we've got this simple mechanic down, like, we know that now, I think it goes to, the back of your mind a little bit in priority, that you're like, this isn't something I need to be worrying about as much anymore. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I got caught out by it. But it happens, and I remember you even saying to me, like, I think I got caught in something when we were doing Looking for Raid, and you were like, look, don't worry about it. It happens. Like, it still happens to me in the bigger raids that I'm doing, and it happens to people. Like, it's gonna happen sometimes.
The worst thing you can do as a raid leader or assistant raid leader, or just a normal player for that matter, is to be extremely harsh at that player. Because one thing that I know doesn't work for me is if people is pointing me out and being, maybe maybe even calling me an idiot for dying to stuff like that, or how can you die to something simple like that, being really harsh, I get a little bit nervous. And when you get nervous, then you will fuck up even more, because then you're not, your focus is on being nervous instead of focusing on the game and stuff like that. So I definitely think the best way is to be supportive and be like, hey, it happens to even the best. Just imagine how many times, they're looking for the Race to World First Raiders have died to silly stuff like that when they figured things out and things like that, and they don't hear a bad thing about it. Obviously, if you continue doing the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again, then there's probably something you really need to pay focus to, but never start yell at people. Don't write stupid messages in Looking for Raid chat or something like that, because it doesn't help. It actually is making things worse.
And that's something I'm curious about, that if you out there, listener, have been doing a lot of Looking for Raid, like, how has your experience been with this? Because mine has been fairly positive. I haven't really seen people raging when things have gone wrong, and I don't know if that's a shift in the mentality in that aspect, or that we have just got lucky, because I'd love to hear more from people about that.
I have a question for you now, because we do have a fair... I don't know if you're going to run through all bosses, but I was just sort of curious, besides Raszageth, is there any bosses that is like standing out in your mind as being like a particular fun fight, or something special about it, something like that? Is there something?
Yes, and, well, spider warning. I'm going to talk about spiders. Sorry everyone. The Sonar fight, which is a icicle elemental spider that... I just really enjoyed the setting for this fight, that you're in this cavern, this ice cavern, and the spider's there, and the spider's like firing down webs and icy patches on the floor, which sort of reminds me of like one of those Super Mario 3 levels where it's an ice level and you're running, but you're running one way and then you're trying to stop, but you keep going one way. And you're just slowly elevating in this area, and I just thought it was cool. It's like a fight that you're constantly on the move. I can imagine playing not a hunter, that could be quite a frustrating fight, because you can't really stand still too much. As a hunter, you're just like, I can move and I can shoot and I'm having a good time. I just generally thought, this is a bit different. Usually you have, set the scene and you're moving out of bad stuff and you're moving when required, but this elevation. I'd never really seen anything
No.
like that before, and I thought it was quite a unique fight, and I quite enjoyed it just thematically.
It is definitely a unique fight. I don't really think we've had anything similar that nothing comes to mind at least. I know that our tanks, especially one of them, was not good friends with this fight because he kept getting knocked off the edge by the spider and had to run up or maybe dying in the process and stuff like that. So he was definitely not feeling it. I will say that I totally agree with you. I enjoyed the fight so much more as a hunter than I had done on any other classes.
Yeah, I feel bad for every other class, but as a hunter, it's awesome.
I mean, it's all right because I'm playing as an evoker on my main this expansion, so it's all right because we do have some movement abilities that can help us getting out of the bad stuff and things like that. But also how evokers work is people need to be sort of grouped up, at least the build that I'm playing. So and people just spread too much out for me to have a good amount of fun. But then again, we have other healers. They then fill out that gap that my healer in this particular fight leaves. So it's just part of the game.
Was there any fights apart from that one and Raszageth, obviously?
Yeah.
That were a particular highlight for you or your guild? Do you have any funny stories to share?
I don't know if I have something funny that happened with the guild, but I do have one fight, and it's probably, some people might probably think this is one of the more boring fights, but it's something where I kind of enjoy these kind of fights. It's the Terrors, the dude in the hole.
Yes. I can't say it was a particularly engaging fight, like a rating perspective, but I loved it just how, hey, the primalists are trying to pull this rock elemental out of the ground, and they're just in the middle of the room, just smashing stuff.
That needs to be one of those fights where you can just stand there and do DPS and move minimally if you're a DPS. I really, really just enjoyed this fight on all the DPS classes that I've done, because you don't really have to do too much. You just need to run sometimes with the again, the circles around you, but besides that, you're just standing there doing DPS. I kind of like those. They're a little bit more simple, but that's fine as well. Your brain do needs a rest from time to time.
Sometimes you just need a feel-good boss.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to take down, and you get some loot from it and you move on.
Exactly.
It's not too taxing on the mind. And actually something that, and I don't know if you notice this or this is just something I'm seeing, is that I feel like a lot of the bosses leading up to Raszageth had some mechanic or something like that where by the end Raszageth was almost using a lot of those mechanics then in like the final form. Like I noticed the knockbacks and the moving out of the stuff and placement of stuff as well. There was the placement with Sonarf with the webs, and there was placement with Raszageth as well, and there was obviously the knockbacks, and with is it Dafia has the knockbacks with the ad
to the platforms.
And I just felt like there was a lot of mechanics all separated, and then when you got to Raszageth, it was pulling from a lot of those in one sort of epic fight, and I actually really appreciated that. Again, going back to the learning point of, it was great to do those in steps, and then okay, now do them all at once. It felt a bit like the Mage Tower, where they introduce mechanics in phase 1 and phase 2, and then by phase 3 it's like, we'll do them all together. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, how it normally have been working is that the mobs before the bosses usually have the same abilities as the boss. You get like a feel for them before you actually get there, and I think I might be wrong, but I don't feel like I can remember other fights where the end boss is pulled from all the other bosses, and I like that idea. So I think it's a cool idea that all the best mechanics from all the other fights are being utilized by the end boss, and so yeah, I think it's cool. I like it. There is the Brood Keeper, the boss before Raszageth, which is, I think it's a cool fight. I don't think that I still fully understand it because there's some X stuff going on.
Does.
And stuff, and I'm just a healer normally in this fight, so I'm just focused on keeping everyone up. So, but no, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of it's again, there's some a lot of stuff that people need to take care of, and it seems like a cool fight. But I don't think it's like one of the top fights. I think it's also a little bit annoying from time to time, but I think it's definitely worth a mention. I think there's some good parts in it, and it's really, really good fun as a healer.
I appreciate that one as well because it gave me real Blackwing Lair vibes as well of the Raszageth fight. You know, the first fight that you encounter there. I was like, oh, what a throwback! And sometimes it's just nice to have those little nostalgic kicks with your encounters as well. So overall, Marty, I don't know how we're scoring this. I don't think we're scoring at all. I had some sort of idea of ranking this out of so many dragon claws or something like that, but maybe we don't do that. But overall, how would you sum up your Vault of Incarnates experience?
How many stars will you give it out of a total of 10 bananas?
How many stars out of bananas? I don't know, that doesn't make sense, but
exactly.
We'll go with it.
Exactly. No, I think overall it's been a really enjoyable first raid. I could have been without the dragon flying in the beginning. It's fun in the beginning. The first few times you do it, it's very tedious when you've done it week after week. But besides that, overall, I think it's definitely up there. I mean, obviously we don't know the rest of the raids yet, so we don't have anything to compare with in this expansion. But as a first raid, I think it was a good raid. I think it is probably on par with the first raid in Shadowlands, which was really good as well and had a good end boss. So overall, really good start.
That is high praise there from Marty. But what did you think out there? What did you think of the Vault of Incarnates? What difficulty have you been doing it on? Have you been heading to looking for raid? Have you had positive experiences there like myself? We would love to know. And that is all we had time for on this episode of Talking WoW today. But thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Tom. That's been Marty.
That's me.
And we've been Talking WoW. Bye.
Bye.
Pathetic tool of the Titans. You are no true dragon.
Thanks for tuning in, champion. Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so, why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice or leave us a comment? You can find Talking WoW on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Hope to see you again soon!